Hi guys, welcome back to magnifyall.com. I am Akash and today we're gonna learn how we can use factory DTO data transfer object promise. In my last video, I explained how to create class in JavaScript and mentioned about using JSON object as constructor parameters. Let's continue our tutorial from there. Okay, so first of all, what I will do is I will just create a simple class. Let's create a class called author. So now the first thing, I created an author class, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create some data variables. So let's go and create a folder here. So I will just create the data files, a new folder called data, and within that I create a folder called author, and within author I will just create a new file called a1. So let's say a1.json, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some JSON property for this one. So we know, okay, what is the author property is going to be ID, first name, last name, website. So I'm going to just define few of them. So for let's say we start with ID, and I'm going to have the ID as the same name as file name. So I will say, okay, ID equal to a1. So that's enough for a data side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a service, and then what actually I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure it's a get, because we want to make it get. So I'll say get, and then I will use config.url, so that will be passed as a part of the config while calling the get method. And then again what I'm going to do is let's make it more useful. So I say, okay, config.url is there, then we are going to change the URL by adding slash and plus. So let's have a ID for the author. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say again config dot ID, that is going to point to the ID of the instance for that service. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more thing called .json, because my file extension name is JSON, but this depends upon how you are, what is the service you are and how you are going to consume it. But what I'm doing is a file, so I can just use like that. So next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it async. So I will say, okay, it's true. That's all for this one. Now I just need to send the data. So I will say x http dot send. So this is going to call. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just define a basic application factory. So let's create a application factory. Then what I'm going to do is in application factory I need to store each and every bean. So yeah, let's make it a bean factory. That is a very good idea. So I will say, okay, bean, and I will change it also to bean. So that make more sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cache. So I will create a cache for beans. So I will just create a hash map. It's just an object, but or we can use it as a hash map also, so that's fine. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an instance of this service. So I will say var and service. I'm creating all this as a private variable equal to new service, and I'm not going to pass anything because this config is not used yet here, so that's fine. The next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a method in a bean factory called find. First of all, let's make it ID, and then what we are going to do is we're going to take the class definition, which class bean you want to create. So I will say class definition, and then the next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to first check it from. So whenever we say, okay, this dot find, give me the bean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check it whether the bean is there in the cache or not. So that's if there is a bean already available in the cache. If bean is not available in the cache, then we have to write the implementation. So I will say else. So we need to have a URL of the data where data resides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it as a URL. So I will say okay, we need a URL, and then what we're going to do is we are going to find this URL. But first of all, we need to attach this URL to the class. So attach the URL of the class is actually depending on the environment. So think you are deploying on the dev or UAT or production, so the URL of that that endpoint is going to be changed, and it may differ for the class to class. So what we should do is actually we should use as application configuration. So let's attach this URL to this author class. So what I'm going to do is, after invoking everything, let's have our application configuration here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say author dot, I'm going to make it prototype. So I will say prototype, and dot, I will going to make a URL. So we are going to cover the prototype in another tutorial, because it's a very interesting thing. There's a lots of misconception about prototypes, so we are going to clear all the misconception about prototypes. So first of all, what we are going to do is we are going to say author prototype URL, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a URL for this. So I will say okay, the root, then we are going to do the data, then author, and that's the location for our data where we are storing the data, and that we configure for this application. So that so why we did that is we want to make it dynamic to actually point to bind the class with the endpoints where the data store is. So okay, fine, we define that URL, so we can actually use this URL. So we are assuming that when we are going to access the class definition, we are going to access the author class. So what we are going to do here is we are going to assign a service. Okay, URL is going to be class definition dot prototype dot URL. So we tell the service this is a URL that I want to go for, and the second thing we are going to do is we are going to define the ID. So the ID which we are going to, because if you go back to the service implementation, so we are using URL and ID. So we need a URL and we also need an ID for this to be work. So let's go and get ID, and after ID what I'm going to do is I'm to pass the same ID. So find is going to take the ID as input, so I'm going to pass that ID here, ID, and then next thing we need to pass is a class definition, because we need to create the instance of that object. So I will just say okay, class definition is going to be class definition again. So yep, I'll just copy paste that, and then the next thing what we are going to do is we are going to say caller. So who is actually calling this? So there may be a multiple bean factory, so I'm going to call it caller, and that's going to be a caller is going to be this. So this is a bean factory which is going to call it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. So variable is going to be a return object which we are going to return it. So return object, and return object equal to new. Then what I'm going to do is we have a config here, so we can just point to config, then we need a class definition. So this is another way you can initiate the object. So it doesn't matter that you need to know the class, you can dynamically initiate the object in JavaScript, because it's a scripting language, and that's the advantage we have in JavaScript. So I'm going to initiate this class, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the response. What we are going to do is we are going to call config dot, then we are going to access the caller who is going to call this caller, and then we will assume if the caller have an init method. So I will going to say init, and we are going to pass this object there. Yep. And the next thing we are going to do, because there's an init method we define in the caller, so this is our bean factory caller, we don't have init method here, so we need to create an init method. So I will say this dot init equal to function, and that function is going to take object. So I will say obj object, and what we are going to do here is we are going to just make sure that this object is assigned to the same variable what we defined there. So let's attach this one to the same variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say cache id equal to object. So I will say obj, but it need to find the id, and id is not there, so I'm going to take it as a input also. So I will say id, and that need to be passed from service side. So in service that's why we pass the id here, so we can just use that one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this, and that's all. So it will create an id and get it back. Okay. This look interesting. So we create the service. The service is actually going to call a JSON object and populate the project class for us, create a bean, and we have a bean factory which is going to maintain all the bean instance here, and we have a method called find which is going to actually create a method, create an object, or if object is already there for the class, it's going to return back, and we are creating that object in a runtime, so we don't know okay what type of class we are going to use. So let's try this. I know there may be an error, but that's fine, we are going to debug that. So I'll just start at the server, and yep, let's go to console, and yeah, that's fine. So the server responded with that's fine, that's a fair icon, I don't have to worry about that. So let's create a variable that called bean factory. So I will start with bf equal to new bean factory and a constructor. So if I go back and see our app.js and our bean factory config, we are not using anywhere, so that's fine for me. I don't have to define anything right now, and that will create a bf, so that's fine. Bf dot, then we're going to access that method. So the method we expose is find, and what we are gonna do is we are gonna pass, so we need to pass id and class definitions. So we create a data called a1, so I'm going to pass a1 and the class definition. So we are assuming it's going to be author, so we are saying author, and that should work. So yep, so id is not defined, so it says okay id, I'm not able to find the id, and that is in the cache. So it's actually do everything, it's slice, it's come back, and the problem is I'm using underscore id and refer it as id, so my mistake. So I'm going to get id, and that's all. Let's refresh it, go to console, and then again we will create a bean factory and try to access that. Okay, so if you go to network, you will find it's called a1.json, so that means it's loaded. But there's a problem. I will tell you what the problem is. So if you refresh this and you create a bean factory and you try to access this one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to store it in the x variable. So yeah, and if you try to access x, it's empty. So why it's empty is because there is a sync and a sync call. So when we create a class, when we call the bean factory and we find that id for the author, and we try to load that, at that time we found okay, so there's a latency to get the data. If you go back to the network, you'll find it's almost 1 second, and because of that the object is sliced, but the difference for that object is still old, so it won't going to find that. But yeah, if I'm going to do it again, and I will show you, I will go back to the network, I clear everything, and then I come back to console and I hit it, it's not going to call anything because we're going to lead from the cache, and because after some time it's already get the response and create the instance. So this time we will able to access the x, and that's cool. So that means our bean factory is working, but it's not working with the async one. So one thing we can do, and that's the practice we follow till sometimes earlier, because there's a one restriction now which is imposed on async and sync one. So if I make it false, and I come back and refresh it. I go to I create a bean factory, and then I try to access X, and then I try to access X. I will able to access it because it's a sync one. But you can see it's throwing a a warning that this XML HTTP request for the synchronization is not going to work in in future, because so what happens is now they introduce a service worker, so they don't want to use the sync in a main thread of the application. So they want us to use a service worker to create a multiple threading, and within that thread we have to load all the sync information and sync process. So that's why they are depreciating the sync call for Ajax directly. That's all for today, guys. This issue we're going to solve in our next episode by promise. But till then, thanks for watching my video. Please like, comment and subscribe. See you. Bye.